Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. Welcome to the big news. The topic for today's discussion, World Refugee Day and UNHCR. Let us try and understand what is this article all about. The World Refugee Day is an international day designated by the United Nations to honor refugees around the globe. This is celebrated every year on June 20th. And the World Refugee Day was celebrated on this day because it marked 50 years since the adoption of the 1951 Refugee Convention. Why is this day celebrated? That is because it celebrates the strength and courage of people who have been forced to flee their home country to escape conflict or persecution. When we speak about refugees, these refugees usually have a lot of difficulties after leaving their homes. They do not have a place to live. They might settle in refugee camps. They do not have any possessions of their own. They might not have food to eat. They might not have water to drink for days as well. And they face extreme kind of violence and suffering from disease, trauma, mental issues as well as despair. In order to provide them some courage, in order to create some awareness among the general public about the hardships of the refugees, what we have is this World Refugee Day. So the World Refugee Day is an occasion to build empathy and understanding for their plight and recognize their resilience in rebuilding their lives. When we look into the statistics, how many refugees are there world over? How many refugees move from one country to another? What are the different kinds of issues they face? According to UNHCR, there are about 65.3 million individuals worldwide who have been forcefully displaced. UNHCR's Global Trends report reported that 82.4 million people have been displaced in 2020 amid the COVID-19 pandemic. The United Nations claims that 79.5 million people have been displaced by the end of 2019. UN also have a backlog of asylum claims of over 1.1 million people and are expecting above 3 lakh new claims as well. Daily, 42,500 individuals run out of their homes in search of safety within their own country or other nations' borders. Developing countries house about 86% of the world's refugees. So it is in this particular backdrop we have to understand who are the different kinds of forcibly displaced people. When we speak about forcibly displaced persons, we might call these people as refugees. You can call certain other people as internally displaced persons. You might also call few people as stateless persons and then few people as returnees. Who are these refugees? If we consider the United Nations 1951 Refugee Convention, it goes on to say a refugee is someone who fled his or her country owing to a well-founded fear of persecution because of his or her race, religion, nationality, membership in a particular social group or political opinion. Because these people are not safe in their own country, they move to some other country because they are persecuted in their own country. So because they have to save their lives, live for the other people in and around them, for their own family members, they move from one country to another country, and that is a person who's called as a refugee. So many refugees are also in exile to escape the effects of natural or the human-made disasters. Then we have something called as the internally displaced persons. Who are these internally displaced persons? If we are speaking about refugees, what do? They move from one country to another. They cross a different political border. But if we are speaking about internally displaced people, they do not move to a different country, but they move in the same country from one state to another, from one district to another. So these are the people who are called as internally displaced people. So the people who have not crossed any of the international borders but have moved to a different region within the same country are called as the internally displaced persons. Then we have something called as the stateless persons. Who are these stateless persons? They do not have any nationality whatsoever. If I ask you which is your state, you will say India is your country. If I ask you what is your citizenship character, you might say that you are an Indian. So a person who does not have any nationality, who is not given any citizenship whatsoever, does not belong to any country, is called a stateless person. Then we have something called as the returnees. Who are these returnees? Let's say for example, there is a person who's crossed the borders, who has moved to a different country, but once things are settled down in his own country, he comes back to his country, he is called as a returnee. So when we speak about forcibly displaced persons, all these people belong to that particular category. You might also have asylum as well, and these people might also ask asylum in another country. And one of the institutes that take care of all these refugees is what is called as UNHCR. What does UNHCR stand for? It stands for United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. We require one of the international organizations. This international organization happened to be supported by the United Nations. So you have the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, who basically looks into all the issues and concerns with respect to the refugees. So if we speak about such an organization, it is mandated to provide protection to these refugees as well as to the forcibly displaced communities. This happens to be an international organization working to save life, safeguarding the rights and providing a better future for the refugees, forcibly displaced communities as well as the stateless people. The organization's target audience involve refugees, people who are forcibly displaced from their homes, asylum seekers, internally displaced persons as well as the stateless people. This was established back in the year 1950 in the wake of mass displacements caused due to the Second World War. We know the havoc and the restlessness that the Second World War had created. Large number of people became houseless, and it is at this particular point you required an international organization to protect and safeguard the rights of the people, which is why the United Nations establishes High Commissioner for the Refugee. The UNHCR has also won Nobel Prize for the Peace twice, and remember, this is headquartered in Geneva in Switzerland, which can be very important from the preliminary examination point of view. Its parent organization is the United Nations General Assembly, and the UNHCR gives what is called as Nansen Refugee Award annually to people who work in the field of refugee rights and protection. These are some of the important factual data that you have to remember from the preliminary examination point of view. Now that we have understood an international organization working for the people in a particular area if they move from one region to another, but you also require some of the laws, you also require rules as well, you also require a mandate or a convention in order to put this organizational role and to effectively implement what we require a certain framework, and that framework is what is called as the 1951 Refugee Convention. What is this 1951 Refugee Convention? This happens to be a UN treaty that defines who a refugee is and establishes the rights of such persons and also those who are granted asylum. So this happens to be a legal document which governs the working of the UNHCR. We did discuss about the organization. So how this organization has to work, who are the people in this organization, how many number of people are manned in this organization, what should be the progress of this organization, how should they implement it, is present in this legal document called as the 1951 Refugee Convention. It is also called as Convention relating to status of the refugee or the Geneva Convention. It also talks about responsibilities and legal obligations of countries that grant asylum status to the people. What do we understand by this? There are refugees who move from one country to another. So when they move to another country, they do have their own share of rights. These rights will also have to be recognized by another country. What are these rights? Let's say, for example, the right not to be expelled except under certain strictly defined conditions, the right not to be punished for illegal entry into the territory of a contracting state, the right to work, housing, education, public relief assistance, freedom of religion, accessing the court, freedom of movement within the territory, and the right to be issued identity and travel documents. All these are important rights that is accorded to a refugee. So if this refugee goes to a different country, he should not be pushed out immediately. He should be given all these rights. Such legal rights are to be guaranteed. So where do we have this? It is provided in 1951 Refugee Convention. Apart from that convention, it also defines those who are not eligible for the asylum status, such as the war criminals, and this convention is the central guiding document of international refugee protection today. As part of this convention, we have one of the word called as the non-refoulement. What is this non-refoulement? This happens to be a fundamental principle of international law that forbids a country receiving asylum seekers from returning them to a country in which they would be likely in danger of persecution based on race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group, or political opinion. Let me simplify this process for you. Let's say there is an individual A. This individual A happens to be present in, let's say, Myanmar. So this particular person is in Myanmar. He goes to a different country. So the minute he goes to a different country, let's say Thailand, Thailand should not send him back, because the minute he is sent back, he may be killed in Myanmar. So the non-refoulement principle currently says that if a person fears that his life is under threat, his life may be snatched away by a particular organization in his home country or even by the government, and if he seeks asylum or refugee status in another country, he should not be pushed back immediately until that life is safeguarded in his home country. So the non-refoulement clearly is an international obligation. But India is not signatory to 1951 Refugee Convention. So does this mean that non-refoulement principle need not be followed? We have an answer to this. What we have is the executive at times has said that India, not being a 1951 conventional treaty member, need not have to follow these international obligations. But you also have number of high courts which have delved deep into it and has said that non-refoulement principle will also have to be adopted in India, despite India not being a member of 1951 convention. What are these landmark judgments? We have one of the landmark judgments given by the High Court of Manipur in Nandita Haksa versus the state of Manipur. In this case, about 7 Myanmari citizens had literally entered India without permission, but then you also had the High Court of Manipur which gave these 7 Myanmarese people to go to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees office in Delhi and seek protection under this office. What did the court say? The court said yes, India is not a signatory to the 1951 convention, but we have an important article in the Indian Constitution which speaks about Article 21. Article 21 is about right to life, but this very principle of non-refoulement comes under the Article 21, because if this particular person is sent back to his country, his life would be snatched away, and if his life is snatched away, what we are violating is Article 21. So Nandita Haksa versus the state of Manipur, the High Court of Manipur clearly said that India, despite not being the member of this convention, has to ensure that Article 21 is intact, for which non-refoulement procedure has to be respected. The same opinion was also upheld by the Gujarat High Court in KTR Abbas Habib Al Kutefi versus the Union of India back in the year 1999. Apart from the 1951 convention, we also have the 1967 protocol as well. This relates to the status of refugees, alternatively known as 1967 protocol, and this happens to be an international document for the refugee rights. What is so different about the 1967 protocol? When you consider the 1967 protocol, it includes all the refugees from different countries, but if you consider the 1951 convention, it only included refugees from Europe. So in order to expand this horizon, what we have is the 1967 protocol. This removes the Eurocentricity of the convention, and India is not a signatory to the 1967 protocol as well. Since India is not part of the 1951 convention, it is not part of the 1967 protocol. Does it mean India does not accept the refugees? No. India has accepted the refugees in the past as well. If you consider number of scenarios, we have given protection to the Tibetans, also to the Sri Lankan Tamils as well. So what we are able to provide protection is on a case-to-case basis. But the problem is we do not have a national refugee protection framework. What is the issue? Why does India not accept this particular convention? That is because India believes that this is majorly to do with the security related aspects. Why? In case there are large number of people who enter into India, it will put a strain on the local infrastructure as well as its resources, and we don't know about the radicalization of the people. As a result, in order to make sure that India is keeping its security paradigm updated, what we have is India not signing this convention. Added to it, India does not also want to upset the demographic balance, as South Asia is a tinderbox of population, and if we start accepting, we already have a large population and we may have to accept large number of people, which is why India has not accepted the convention, or it does not have a policy of its own. We also have another declaration called as the New York Declaration for Refugees and Migrants. What are the important provisions of this declaration? protect the human rights of all refugees and migrants regardless of status. This includes the rights of women and girls, promoting their full, equal and meaningful participation in finding solutions, ensure that all refugee and migrant children are receiving education within a few months of arrival, prevent and respond to sexual and gender based violence, support these countries rescuing, receiving and hosting large number of refugees and migrants, work towards ending the practice of detaining children for the purpose of determining their migration status, strongly condemn xenophobia against refugees and migrants and support a global campaign to counter it, and strengthen the positive contributions made by migrants to economic and social development in their host countries. If we are able to do so, and if we are able to bring this awareness to the local people in that particular country, this refugee crisis can be comparatively reduced, is what is this issue all about. This is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.